I'll do a little Mangala Charana before we start. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Rup Shri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namachintamani Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddha Nityamukta Pinatva Nama Namino Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Radhe Shyam. So, what is love? It's a big question. It's a big topic. It's the month of Kartik for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It's a special time where we're actually celebrating love. Practically exclusively, we're celebrating the triumph of love. A very special pastime happens in this month where God himself becomes bound up, becomes tied and subjugated by love. And so I wanted to explore a little bit the topic of love because it's simultaneously one of the most deeply felt visceral urges of all human beings. All human beings move to love like the rivers move to the sea, and it's also so enigmatic. We don't know exactly what love is, although we're so compelled by it. We chase after it, we're frustrated in our searches for it, and so it's a it's a topic worth exploring. For Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it's supposed to be what we call our prayojana. So it's like our guiding star. It's the thing that we're chasing after the most. Prema is our prayojana. Prema means love. And so, yeah, it deserves lots of deliberation, lots of exploration, it deserves to be understood. So hopefully this presentation will give some understanding or at least provoke some more questions. I think for me, the exploration has provoked more questions, more curiosity, more desire to understand what is it that is love. So first off, why love? Why is it so compelling? Why is it such a driving force for the human psyche? Well, we can observe, as I said a little bit, we can observe what love's effect is on humanity. It's pretty self-evident to be the greatest of all goals. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas may have it rightly situated as their prayojana, as their goal, because everybody moves for it. Everybody chases after love in this world. And there's really nothing that finds its way on top of love as a goal. People can gain all the wealth in the world, and they're willing to throw that away for the sake of love. Love drives people to do insane things that are completely counterintuitive to every other urge that we have. Love can make people starve. It can make people kill. It can make people give everything that they have and then go and find more. It presents itself almost as an addiction to people when they come across it. It definitely asserts itself again viscerally and in a felt way as the most powerful force, one of the most powerful forces in the world. It's the most written about topic in all of literature. It's all the great songs of the world ultimately culminate in love. It's so unanimously chased after that it's also the greatest cliche. It's the thing that we write off as what we understand the most. And everybody just assumes, I know what love is because I'm chasing after it. I know I've heard all the songs, I've seen all the bumper stickers. So love's influence is undeniable. And no one's excluded from the aspiration to it because nobody can resist it. So again, no matter what skill someone has, no matter what resources they acquire, at the end of the day, love can come and whisper in their ear and throw everything and every bit of stability that they have off. Because nothing really is more valuable to them. Nothing is more valuable to us. So much so that in his exploration on this topic, Jiva Goswami, he writes a book called Priti Sandarbha, which is, to make that simple, it's like an exegesis on love. It's a great exploration into what it is that love is, particularly transcendental love. But so much so is nothing more valuable to human beings that we're actually willing to die for it, which is really weird because from Jiva Goswami's perspective as a Vedantist, as a Vedic scholar, most of the topics, most of the conversation in that philosophy revolves around the discovery of the self, the discovery of who I truly am, as opposed to the things that I am not, all the things that I identify with, the body, the mind, the world around me, the things that I take as mine and related to me. But Jiva Goswami makes this interesting distinction that love proves itself as self-evidently powerful and the greatest goal for humanity because people are willing to die for it, or to say it in another way, they're willing to sacrifice their selves for it. So the self is extremely valuable according to Vedanta, and it's what we're all looking to understand. But then comes along love, this weird thing, and it makes people sacrifice themselves because people in this world, they think that their bodies are themselves, but if they love someone, they're very willing to throw that into a fire or under the wheels of a truck to push the person that they love out of the way and to protect them. And so in this odd way, we see that love actually helps one transcend their self, the realm of their own consciousness and their own self. So love has this amazing ability. Another thing about love is it can harmonize and accommodate anything. Actually, we judge things as good and bad in this world on the basis of the effect that we see that they have. We take violence to be violent, and we take kindness to be kind. And we think of our own maintenance in straightforward ways, that I don't want to starve. I'd like to eat. But love does this weird thing where actually anything that's done in the name of love becomes anointed as good. It becomes anointed as and uplifted and transmuted. In other words, a good example is the slap of a mother. I always heard this. I heard this example from a friend of mine, and it stuck with me, that he watched a mother walking with her 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old ran out into traffic all of a sudden, like broke free of his mother's grasp and darted out into traffic and ran across the road. And so his mother chased after him. And my friend saw the mother spank the child. And we would think, if we just walked up on the street and saw somebody spanking their child, somebody beating their child, oh, this is terrible. You can't hit your kids, especially the way the world has gone now. Like, absolutely not, corporal punishment. We're not doing that. Most countries don't allow that. But with the right context, understanding that mother was overwhelmed with protective emotion and love for her child and fear that he had just about ended his life. She was spanking him. And so my friend's observation, I don't mean to bring it to a commentary on whether this is right or wrong. My friend's observation, seeing this woman do this, was that those were slaps of love, that there were tears pouring down her face, and this was her love. So love has this transmutative effect where it can take anything and make it right. If something is motivated by love, then it becomes right. So it can harmonize anything. It can accommodate anything. It can bridge any gap. And finally, no one can stand in front of love's power. Actually, no one can get away from the grip of affection. It's actually the harmonizer, the great mover, the thing that everybody needs and everybody desperately wants, and the thing that molds people into the best of themselves. And it's ultimately the strongest force that there is. And as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we hold this so strongly because our stories tell us that not even God can stand in front of the power of love. So what to speak of any other entity, what to speak of any smaller being, any other little fragmentary jiva, any other little entity. Not even God can stand in front of love. Such a funny thing that God, the root of everything, the center and the source of all things, he becomes subjugated by the harmonious, amazing power of love. So love really speaks for itself. It's not a concept that people even really need to, they need to think about it and they need to understand it, which is going to be the next part. But what I mean to say is, it's not something that needs to be proven to someone as useful or worthy, because it's just so viscerally felt, and it just grips people. It just grabs people and throws them onto a completely different course in their life than they were expecting when they encounter it. So it doesn't really need to be rationalized or proved that it is what it is and that it has the power that it has. But one problem that we have is understanding what it is, because it seems to grip people and it seems to be so self-evident, but then it also seems to be that we can do it wrong very easily, or we can mess it up, or if we approach it the wrong way, then we end up worse off than we were when we went through what we went through with love. We end up destitute. We end up in a difficult situation. This is especially so in the modern world, where people have less and less of an understanding of what love is and what it is not. And so when we're trying to understand what transcendental love is, one, we have to study that because that's outside of our purview. We have to understand where to go in order to gain a deeper understanding of love. So where can we go to understand it? Again, as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we're lucky that we have a roadmap laid out for us. So Jiva Goswami, he makes a really interesting observation that I hadn't encountered until I came across this verse that he quotes. He quotes a verse from a book called the Vishnu Purana, which basically says, it's a prayer by Prahlad Maharaj, where he's saying, "O Lord," he's praying to his Lord, Nrsimhadev. He's saying, please don't let that love, that priti, or that affection, which is the same as the love that is in the hearts of those who walk in this world, please don't let that love go away from my heart as I meditate upon you. And this verse has been translated in multiple ways because it's a little bit enigmatic. Because from a Vedantic perspective, love is often conflated with lust. And because there's a fundamental mistake in this world of taking the self to be the body and then taking everybody else's body to be their self as well, there's a bit of a tendency towards renunciation in many Vedantic circles and getting away from that identification. And so deadening oneself and hardening oneself against any influences that come from the outside world in favor of the inner world. But Prahlad Maharaj seems to be saying directly here that I want the love that is in the hearts of those who are unwise in this world. I want that love to stay in my heart. So may that love stay in my heart and never go away as I meditate on you. So Jiva Goswami takes this as a descriptive, or as a description of the definition of love. And what he's saying is that transcendental love and material love are the same in their qualities. He goes through a very technical analysis, but his conclusion is that transcendental love and what we'd call material love, the love that we see in this world, share all the same qualities. In other words, if we want to understand transcendent love, we can look to the love that is in this world to understand how it operates, which is really good, because then we don't have to work with an ineffable concept that we just have to pray for. We actually have something that we can look and measure and see if we're trying to cultivate. And also, in the light that this is a goal of ours, it's supposed to be our greatest goal, and it seems to be the goal of everybody, actually. In light of that, we now have something that we can aspire for more deeply because we can understand what it is. Because one of the greatest difficulties in spiritual life is doubt. And ambiguity creates doubts like no other. Ambiguity and doubt can just stop somebody completely, because if you don't feel convinced that the goal that you're going towards is a worthy goal, that it's nice, that you would like it, then it's not actually your goal. It's not actually something that you're going to strive for. And so it's important to remove ambiguity and to remove doubt wherever possible, so that one can feel an urgency. One can feel that, I mean, think about it. If I'm going to say, this is the goal of my life, this is the thing that I want the most, I mean, paying lip service to that is okay, but it really will come out in my actions. It will really come out in the way that I walk in this world if I actually take such a thing as the goal of my life. So when we say love is my prayojana, love is the goal of my life, that's going to come out in our actions, in the way that we walk through the world. And so we had better understand it to the best of our ability. So this verse, I won't really go into the technical breakdown of it, because already I'm getting too technical for my own sake, but I'll give the bullet points of what Srila Jiva Goswami extracts out of it. That in this analysis of love and material love as an accurate parallel to spiritual love, he says love is a feeling, specifically a feeling of favorability towards one's beloved. It's the desire for the welfare of the beloved. So right off the bat, extremely important thing about love, it has an object. This is important because the major problem that we face when we think about love is we conflate it with happiness. We conflate it with our own experience that we gain from interactions with another. So love primarily is a desire for the object of your love to be happy, or to have, for their welfare to be ensured. To do good by the person that you love is one of the characteristics of love, this sort of favorability towards the beloved. Now, when we conflate that with happiness, we're not actually loving, because then the person is they're becoming an instrument to my own happiness. And whereas love is focused on another, love is focused on the other entity as my beloved. If we conflate love with happiness, then the who is supposed to be the beloved is actually just supposed to serve my own subjective feeling. So happiness is completely subjective in that it's just about me, and it's about things that stimulate a feeling that I have. Whereas love, it has an object. So objective is not exactly the word, but there are two in love. There's me, and there's the person that I love. And the person that I love actually takes primacy in this weird way that we're drawn to, where they become more important than us, and we actually lose ourselves in them. And for some reason, as human beings, we really like this. We really like to lose ourselves into another person. You could say it another way. We like, because this is the experience that most people have in love, we like to find ourselves in another being. So it's this funky thing that we do. It's not intuitive at all. It's not really great for survival. Again, we do insane things when we fall into the grip of this thing called love, but we like to forget about ourselves and lose ourselves for the sake of another. So this is the difference between love and happiness. And it's a very important distinction that we need to make. Now, this mistake is understandable because there is happiness in love. So this is where people get things wrong. And as far as I understand it, this is where it gets confusing, because we're not after happiness in love. Actually, the happiness of our beloved, the happiness of the people that we care about and that we have affection for is primary. But there is a type of happiness that comes out of seeing, and it's actually greater than one's own subjective happiness that's focused on one's own gratification. There's a type of happiness that comes as a secondary result of bringing about the happiness of one's beloved, of satisfying one's beloved. And now we come back to the kind of transmutatory powers of love. Love has this really weird thing that when you are in love and you are satisfying the beloved and you are bringing about your beloved's happiness and their welfare, you can't actually experience suffering. You can go through what somebody would see as suffering, but all of your suffering will be turned into some sort of bliss. You'll experience a tremendous amount of direct happiness, and your suffering will be turned into bliss. And I can give you a simple example for this. That, again, say you're with a really close friend, or you're with your wife or your husband or your children. If you have children, this is the most easy to understand. And you're both extremely hungry, and you come across somebody that has some food, but they've only got enough food for one person. And it's you and your child. You're going to give your child all of the food. You're going to give your child the food and make sure that they're satisfied and that they're happy. And you're going to continue to starve. But because you've fed the person that you love, and because you know that their welfare is there, actually, you're going to be happy with that. You're going to feel good about that. And that's completely counterintuitive. It doesn't make any sense until you're in the experience. We can understand that because we know what that's like, because we are drawn to do this for the people that we care about. Actually, if you did the other thing, and if you did the more sensible thing, and you ate the food yourself, you wouldn't be able to live with yourself. The food wouldn't taste good. You'd feel horrible, and you'd probably want to die, because that's the power of love. That's the confusing power of how love gets in the way of the normal way of things, and it can transmute suffering into happiness. And it can transmute happiness into suffering. What should make you happy? Starving? No longer starving. Physiologically speaking, everything's good. I'm not hungry anymore. I should feel good. Would be tremendous suffering. So the beloved is primary. The object of one's love is primary in love, not one's own happiness. And this is really amazing because, again, we have this tendency to want to lose ourselves in love. We actually, our own self-concept vanishes, one could say, into the fire of the desire to bring about the beloved's welfare and happiness. We are freed from the limitations of our egoic self-reference, our I'm the center, everything revolves around me, when we love. And we all have a drive to do this. We have a drive for this to take place. So love is a feeling, and it is I guess objective is a word that we could use for this. It's not a subjective feeling. It's a shared experience between multiple entities, between two entities. There's a lover and there's a beloved. So this is important to understand. It's also not an action. We often say, because we often get this right in Vedantic circles, that we'll say we use the word love wrong. We'll often say love is not a feeling. Actually, it's an action, because love is something that you do. But actually, love is something that you feel. It's not an action. It's just that it's not this subjective feeling. Like if I say I love ice cream, that's not love, because if I loved ice cream, then I would want to preserve it for as long as possible. I wouldn't want to hurt it in any way by stuffing it in my mouth and eating it. So there's no love there. But love is also not an action, because it is this feeling of a desire for favorability. It's the thing that imbues our actions and makes them worthy in what they really are. Love imbues our actions, and it's the ultimate motivator of our actions in love. And it's the guiding principle behind the actions of love. Because naturally, if you love someone, you're going to be motivated by action. But the point of this distinction is that if the action was love, it doesn't make sense that the action is love, because you can do an action without it being motivated by love. You can do something and it be an empty something that you're doing. You can do something on the basis of fear. You can do something on the basis of, somebody else has told you to do it. So love is this feeling of favorability, which underpins the actions and motivates the actions that we take. But what's important actually is that the feeling is there, that our heart is there, that our investment in the person that we're acting for is there. So the beloved stays primary, and love is a focus on one's beloved. Now, we come to another question, because this isn't just about love, and it's not a self-help presentation to bring us to a better way to love the people that we're in relationships with already, although that's extremely important. But because that doesn't generally work out, because we can't love everyone, people get confused as well. So in this world, terrible things happen in the name of love, because our love is either conditional or it's too narrow. So if we love someone very deeply, we automatically have to disregard other people in this world, because we can only love so many. If I love my child and there are other people's children and there's not enough food, I may feed my child because that's my child, and then other children will starve. And there may be nothing I can do about that from an existential perspective, but it still shows that The love of this world is inherently biased because it isn't wide enough, which is why in spiritual circles we come to the idea of loving God. And there are many reasons why we need to love God. And I want to go over some of them now, because this is really what's being posited by the Gaudiya Sampradaya and by really every major world tradition, I would say, to different levels of complexity and depth. Why love for God? Well, because he's the one that we're looking for. So we're running around. I said earlier that we're looking to lose ourselves or to find ourselves in another being. And this is ultimately because we're looking for God. We're looking for the self outside of ourselves or deep inside of ourselves. And God is that self. God is the self of ourselves because he's the root of our very existence. He is the ultimate self that underpins our selfhood. And we're hopelessly selfish. Again, we have this funny tendency to seek ourself in another, to seek the ultimate intimacy of knowing and being known wholly in relation to another being. And he's that being. He's the one that we're seeking. So what makes this worthy of exploring? Well, one good reason is he's able to reciprocate entirely with us. You see, we have this weird tendency in love as well to develop the most insane standards possible. This desire to be known all the way to be reciprocated with perfectly, to be known all the way. And anyone who has been through the throes of love understands what this is, that you just have this ridiculous expectation that this person should be psychic, and this belief that I could know them in the same way and be psychic in my linking up with them. And it's rapturous. And it's what we're seeking as beings. And because God is the self of ourselves, he's the whole, which we are a little part of. And so he's the most intimately connected with us. That level of connection is possible. That level of understanding is possible. So he's a worthy object of our love, a worthy place, a worthy person to aspire to love. Because actually, he's the only entity that won't disappoint us. He's the only person capable of not disappointing us. He's able to reciprocate fully with our giving. And that's important because we want to give ourselves fully. But we are looking for somebody that if we give ourselves fully to, we won't be let down. That's the problem with love in this world, is we're bouncing around. One of the problems with love in this world is we're bouncing around looking for a worthy object of our love, because this is the most intimate thing. We're looking to give ourselves entirely. It's everything. If I'm trying to give everything I have, I'm naturally going to be a little scared if it doesn't look like the person I'm giving it to is going to be able to honor it. And so it's a certain odd type of chastity in the soul, a desire to not settle for anything less than perfect. And that is the driving force that brings us to wanting to love God. He is minutely and personally aware of all of the details of our love. And everyone else is going to fail to live up to our expectations in some way or another. This is important to understand so that we can accept other people as well. So we can be more realistic and we can be small loving while we aspire for big love. Because we shouldn't aspire for big love in the wrong places, because we'll be frustrated. We'll frustrate other people. And then we may do the opposite and hurt people in our enmity, in the come down from that, the lashback from such a thing. This doesn't just happen between lovers. This also happens with parents and their children. Again, oftentimes examining parents and children is a more prudent way of sussing out the way love works than it is to examine lovers. You can get things from that, and there's something about the rapture of love that you can get from that observation. But with parents and children, it's a lot more straightforward, at least because you have the parent who really is doing a great amount of love, and you have the child who's very much the beloved. the one who's loved. But you still see that parents who give themselves entirely to their kids become teenagers, and then the parents are just left aloof. Now all of a sudden they hate me. They've completely disregarded, everything that I tried to give. They don't understand anything about how much I suffered for their welfare. And this is part of the maturity of growing up in this world and realizing what it means to love unconditionally also. And so everyone will ultimately fail to live up to the ridiculous expectations that we have. And that's because we are expecting to find God. It's built in us that we can settle for nothing less. And we can try to trick ourselves and think like, well, no, this is enough. And it's actually, I just need to temper my expectations. But actually, we don't need to temper our expectations. We need to realize where they should be placed. That's the most important thing. It's not that we should give up love or that we should give up a search for a worthy beloved. It's that we should put our expectations in the right place. And this is the entire search in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This is that really the entire search of Vedanta. And what I believe is this is the search of the spiritual experience. This is the search of all great major religions, is to come to the ultimate lovable and to be loved and in love with the ultimate lovable. And that's God. And a rose by any other name is still a rose. Now, another thing, and this is probably my favorite point here, which hopefully I'll be able to churn out a little bit, because I think this, for me, this is the newest point that has occurred to me in this topic, is that when we talk about why loving God and we talk about the problem of placing our love upon anyone else as the primary beloved, we talk about why loving God. Well, if we love God, and he's the root of everything that exists, he's in that sense, this is easy for the Vedantists, for those who follow a Vedic paradigm, for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. In that sense, he is all that exists. So God is everything, and he's also different from everything because there's God and there's his energies, but those energies are included within him. And so if you love him, then you also gain a context by which you can love everything and everyone else without exception. So this is where, if we place our love in the right order, if we have the hierarchy of reality in the right way, and we love God first, there's a verse, that by watering the root of a tree, everything else is fulfilled. Everything else, its branches, its trunk, its leaves, they all get nourishment from that water. So God is compared to the root, but he's also the whole tree. He's also everything because everything comes from him. He's the existential root of all that exists. There can be nothing outside of God. If there was something outside of God, that would mean that he was contained in something, and that something that he was contained in would be God, and he would cease to be God. So God is simultaneously the foundation of everything and is everything and is hyper-personal and is able to be our personal beloved. So by loving that personal beloved, you are also loving everything else, and you now have a context to understand how everything that you see is intimately related and is some little piece of your beloved. And so now you can understand how to love everything and everyone. You can walk through this world, and actually you're not allowed to reject anything or anyone. You're not allowed to set anything aside. It's all a matter of how does love harmonize what you're seeing. You're not allowed to look at any being, any entity, anything, and desecrate it, look at it with unsacred eyes, because it's all a portion of the person that you're committed to loving. And so, yeah, I'm really compelled by this, that love is the great harmonizer, that love is the thing that makes everything make sense. It's the great yardstick by which we can measure reality. and that we're called to measure reality with. And nothing else makes sense. Nothing else makes sense without that yardstick. And God himself measures things that way. He only cares about that, actually. Everything else is just fun coming out from that. And that's the vision that we aspire to. So I honestly was not able to do as much justice as I hoped I could for this topic, but this is what came out. This is a very special month, and this is a very special Sangha. So I really appreciate the invitation here. And if there are any comments or questions, then I welcome them. Maybe we can get something churning, the dialogue. Bhakti Rasa?
Ujjwal, thanks so much for this beautiful sharing. There's so many points that really ring true and make me think about things and revision things. Really, thank you, beautiful. And one thing that came to me was when you were speaking about how love is not a verb. I was thinking, perhaps it can be described as not a verb, not a noun, but a state of being. That it is a beingness. So I wonder what you had to.
Yeah, I would say that makes sense, because so when we say it's a feeling, the more accurate translation of that is it's a particular state of consciousness. So it's a jnana vishesha, a particular state of consciousness, and it's a perpetual state of consciousness. It's meant to be an absorption. So when we say feeling, also that's not exactly right. That's a little bit of a simplification, just to bring about that there should be some emotional content there. I would agree with you, though. Yeah, it's a state of being, and it's supposed to be, it's like an energy that is supposed to completely subsume and what's the word I'm looking for? Suffuse our being, so that we basically become that, in some ways we become love because we're so saturated with love.
Yeah, exactly. And when we think, because God is love and we are nothing other than his DNA. So that's going to be, our to be love is not just to love, but to be love, I think is our goal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. And it's amazing because, again, it's like we know this stuff because we drive towards it. Like we're just, as human beings, whether we like it or not, this is what we want. And we're just trying to do it basically at all times, running around looking for someone to love. And we become very sad when we become divorced from this ideal, from our ideal. So it's an amazing proposition that love is the prayojana, because it's self-evident that that's what we want. That's what we want. And again, that's what God wants. That's what he's doing. It's not even that that's what he wants. Like, that's what he's doing, and that's what we're being invited to. And we find ourselves in a weird existential situation where we're not exactly able to be successful at it. And that creates dissonance and it creates confusion. But actually, it's like our water. It's like, it's like a fish in water. That's where we need to be. We need to be completely suffused by love. And in that sense, then you just are love. Like you can't separate a fish from water. So you can say it is water in some way because it can't live without it.
I like that. I like that point about the oh, I don't know, the kind of non-difference between the object and its environment. I was just talking last night about the classic nature and nurture distinction, and how I believe ultimately those two things coalesce into one, that there's really no difference. But let me ask a slightly different question. You kind of invoked this for me as you were talking about, this classic idea of watering the roots, I think is one way to say it, right? If we really want love, then we'll maybe come to recognize that God is the one that's the perfect object. And through that, we can then express love for God by loving everything. Now, my question is the opposite. Do you think, is it possible, or is it fruitive for in a loving relationship between just two people, that through practicing love with this person, that you might come to the realization of loving the whole? I guess what I mean to ask is it necessary to even invoke God? Because if we find that loving object to be so lovable, then naturally we might think everything can be used to serve that one. I like to think maybe in terms of like Krishna Lila. Of course, the Brajavasis aren't considering Krishna God. So they're not thinking, yes, let us love God and then we will love each other. They're really actually already loving each other, and loving Krishna as one of their own, but not necessarily as something, I don't know, something different, something extraordinary outside of what's normal, what's commonplace in Vraj. Of course, everything there is extraordinary for us. Do you get the point, though?
I think so. Yeah.
I'll try one more time just to say, like, is it, would it be possible, by loving one person here, how might that help elevate us to that platform of loving the whole, independent of some theological beliefs, or vice versa? Is it even possible to love a God that's so transcendent and powerful without first making that relatable?
I feel like there's two questions there. One, the answer that's coming to me basically about it being fruitful to love normal people here, to practice here, and that, like, is it necessary to invoke love of God and concepts of loving God in order to do that first? So I would say yes and no. And I would say, I'll explain why I say no first in the context of the way I view Dharma now. Because we often take Dharma, which basically means codes of morality in this world. It's like law and such, the organization of society. But when we say Dharma, we're talking about the Vedic way of looking at, the old world way of looking at how you order society. It's quite evident to me that Dharma was meant to facilitate opportunities for love and closeness. And old societies were built around facilitating getting outside of yourself to care for the other people around you, to care for your family, to care for your village, to care for the sages in your village, to put everybody where they're in the most advantageous place that they could work together and harmonize. And we often think of this in a pragmatic way, that, that gets things accomplished. But actually what it does is it facilitates intimacy. When everyone has their place, it facilitates intimacy. And so it facilitates love in a way that people, they're surrounded by worldly love. And then that makes it very easy when you get introduced to the concept of transcendent love, that you're already a fish in the water. You're already giving yourself to people. You're a responsible person who only thinks, but who first thinks about those around them before they think about themselves. So this is the pragmatic goal of Dharma. And so that's absolutely doable without a deep concept of God, almost. And here's why the yes is important. Here's why you need theology, I guess you could call it. You need teachings. You need somebody to reveal to you God's existence, because none of that is possible if there's not like the organizing center around which we organize society. And ultimately, if you don't have a connection with God personally in some way, even a small, simple way, then it's tremendously hard to love other people. And it's very easy. And we see that in the modern world as it becomes more postmodern and more atheistic. We move towards a more apathetic, selfish, willing to hurt and write off other people society, a society which is more willing to say, it's just me. And we see people who are divided and they're in a place where they can't even get together and talk about what would be best for everyone because they can't agree on that, because there's no real organizing principle about that. And then the people who are a little smarter and who want to profit off of people because they're really far away from love, and they can just say, yeah, I don't care if lots of people get hurt, as long as I get mine and maybe my close people get theirs, then to hell with this society, to hell with these people. We can see that you need that integral connection. So they both have to happen at the same time, and they both feed each other. Because the other thing is if you just dedicate yourself, and you see this in the modern context of people who take up Eastern traditions, Western people who take up Western modern, we can say modern, East and the West is outdated now, modern psyches who take up old traditions, and they gravitate to renunciation and the worship of the transcendent, and they become harsh and hard and mean, and they themselves don't grow in their hearts. They don't actually get closer to love. They get further from it. And then egregious things happen. You see in world traditions, it's very common that those who become renunciates, they end up doing the worst things in the name of loving God, in the name of trying to do that. So they have to happen together. I really believe that, Dharma is meant to facilitate transcendence. And therefore and in some way in the modern context, I think it's extremely prudent to dedicate yourself to the other human beings around you. God, in every context, that's so important. To your wife, your children, your partner, your brothers, your sisters, your mom, your dad, your friends. We have to think about them more than we think about ourselves. And that's love. Like, from an analytical perspective, as it's presented here, like definitionally, that's love. So that's very important. Now, you raised another really interesting thing when you went in the direction of Vraj, and you said, oh, well, the Vrajvasis, they don't even have this heady concept of God. So they don't even think about him as God. Like, what is this, So do we even need the concept of God? So this highlights that love is the ultimate thing. Because if transcendence and majesty and awe get in the way of love, it goes out the door. Therefore, Krishna is like, we're not going to have that in my deepest place. In Vraj, there's no God, because the concept of God would get in the way of the intimacy and the experience. And so it's not needed there. So when I say there's no God, I don't mean that there's, you know this, but for anyone listening, it's not that there isn't a God. It's that God totally takes away that concept so that intimacy can be there, so that can be facilitated to the highest degree. And he does it so much that he's not just playing a role in that. He doesn't do it in such a way that he's like, yes, I am God and I'm facilitating these people's intimacy, and I've taken away these concepts so they don't know that I'm God. He also has the ability to forget his own godhood so that he can become fully immersed in that love. Because again, love is a two-way thing. So it can't be one-sided. And he's interested also in experiencing that. It's the only thing he's interested in, actually. The only thing that God is interested in is the experience of that. And he's willing to give up, to throw away, to become subservient to anything which will facilitate that. And he's got energies for that. So Yeah, that's an interesting thing. They call that jnana shunya bhakti, love which is devoid of knowledge. Because from where we're at in our growth, we need recognition of the center. We need to hear verses like Yatatra Mula Nishechanena. You need to water the root of the tree. Why? Because we're taking other things to be God and to be the beloved. And then in the name of loving the thing that we've decided to love, we hurt everything else. That's what we do. We have divided consciousness. And so we latch onto one thing. That's the problem. That's the other problem with not having God in the picture and just trying to love is you'll hurt people. Look at every great war. What is that? It's the valuing of one thing over another and deciding, okay, the thing we value is more important. We can destroy the other thing. Look at every time somebody has hurt someone, whether my pleasure is more important than this person's existence, I'll kill them. I'll rob them. It's all just this misapprehension of what the totality of everything is. So we desperately need the concept of God. We desperately need, and it's not just a concept. I don't want to sound like I'm calling that just a concept. We desperately need to understand clearly what the fundament of reality is and how reality works. But after a certain level of growth and depth, then you can get to a place where that gets in the way, where God is like, okay, you can stop calling me God. You can think about it in psychological terms. You come to understand that somebody's a very respectful person and they deserve a certain level of respect because of who they are. And so you have to address them a certain way. And to get to know them, you treat them like that. Like, oh, we can't say the president because we're in America and you're the CEO of this company, you're the CEO of the company. Like, I can't just walk up to you and just treat you however I want to treat you. Like, I work here, I got to get things right. Like, I got to treat you the way that you deserve to be treated. But if our relationship grows and I keep referring to you in that deferential way, you may become annoyed and you'll say, stop calling me the CEO. Stop. We're at the bar right now. We're having a drink. We're at my house. We're sitting at my dinner table. Stop talking to me. Call me Jerry. So that's the same thing. It's the same thing. That God's not interested in that at a certain level because it gets in the way of the love.
Thank you so much. I see that Rasangi is commenting on YouTube already, and if she's listening, I hope she can maybe post a question. But in the meantime, Bhakti Rasa, please.
Yeah, two things while you were speaking, Ujjwal. I really appreciate how you were saying that the whole tree needs to be considered, because that example many times of watering the roots gives people the freedom to spiritual bypass and to not take care of the leaves and actually, think we can just chop down the tree and it'll make watering the roots a lot easier. Just water the roots directly and just let's get rid of the tree. So I really appreciate you integrating those two, because both of them exist, that the tree also is God. So in respect and acknowledgement of that, the tree is the offspring, the flowering of the roots, really. So
yeah, so we can make no exceptions, right? We can't say this thing isn't worthy. It actually, I recently read Man's Search for Meaning for the first time fairly recently, and then that brought me into kind of reading about some of the horrors of the 20th century. And I read the Gulag Archipelago and read just about some of the atrocities that have taken place in the 20th century. And this tendency towards, because I see a parallel here in what you just described, towards recognizing what you think is the best thing or the essential thing, like the root. You see this with a lot of these movements, this tendency towards, okay, now I know what the best thing is. I've got the root. I know how to water it. Everything else is inconvenient. So let's kill it. let's kill half the population so we can grow it back the way we want it to be. And again, it's very subtle. I mean, it's gross in the way it presented itself, but it's this subtle idea that, oh, now I've got the root, but it's still me actually who's the decider of that. Now I can chop away the branches the way I need and I can grow the roots. Like, no, the tree is already perfect. The tree's already perfect. It's my perception that is wayward. My perception is what's in the way that's wrong. I need to work on that. And by tending to the root nicely, I can gain a context for how to understand the tree. I think that this is the basis of all ritual, actually. This is the beginning of transcendent love in my idea, because we can't start love with a feeling of love. We have to start to love with a concept of the way reality is, and then a gradual dawning of gratitude for the way reality is and what my place is in it. And then we can love. Then we can slowly build love on the basis of that gratitude for my position. Because what is my position? Krishnara Nitya Das, an eternal servant, which just means that I'm situated in my place and I need to more understand what I'm supposed to do with my place as oriented towards the root. Because I'm also a leaf of the tree. And if I cut the branch that I'm on, which is what we often do, how's that going to help me? How's that going to help me? So yeah, thanks for bringing that back up. It really has been the biggest thing for me lately. I think because with my exposure to, Eastern philosophy, which I love, and all philosophy, I've made the mistake of being too much in the clouds and not enough with my feet on the ground. And so divorced from the, willingly divorced from looking at the world around me in its glory as part of God's energy.
I definitely understand that. I think so many of us have to pass through that place first. It made me think a little bit about is part of the riddle, the answer to the riddle, the immanence of God here now. That's the God that we can love now. It may, in some ways, it may be harder because it's not the face of supremacy or something. It's in the details that we see the grass, the trees, the earth, that we hopefully understand unites all of us. So it made me think, how to love God here in the eminence. Though I do have a question from Rasangi, which I typed into the chat. She just is asking you maybe to say a little bit more about what you had mentioned. We're programmed to love God.
Okay. There's one thing about the immanence, though, because
Sure.
I have something there for it that I think, because we have to love personal God and understand that it's that personal God who's immanent in everything. It is really hard to love like spread out. It's more of an understanding, like when we think of these heady philosophical concepts, we need a felt understanding of them. Like it needs to go beyond the level of words, that it's like, okay, I now accept that God is immanent in everything. It's a decade for me. It's like, I accept that the paramatma is in every atom. But if I look back at that decade, can I say that I walked through the world with that understanding, and that paramatma who's immanent in everything is a function of and non-different from the personal God who I pray to. If you identify that, like, that's the personal God that I pray to, some people worship the paramatma, then that's also there and that can be there. But I think it's more about a felt understanding that the person that I'm supposed to be worshiping and loving, developing love for, is actually there, and then stepping into the realm of faith. Like, I actually believe that. And I think in the modern world, that's a really tough one, because most of us really just kind of believe the modern paradigm. whether we like to say it or not, like many people have not stepped into the realm of like, oh, I have faith in the scripture. I have faith in the Bhagavatam, for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. That's hard. It's really tough. So that's what I think about that. Bhakti Rasa, was your hand already up? Should I go to Rasangis, or did you have
I
something
just
on
have a quick thing for what you were just saying now. It actually came prior, but it's coming up again. So a lot of times you mentioned about we need to have a concept of reality. So I think that internalizing part of what you're talking about now is to realize that that concept of reality that we might land on is actually God. Is our personal God, and that those two things are not separate.
Yeah.
God is reality.
And that's what's being posited, right? That's achintya bheda bheda tattva, simultaneously non-different and different. And again, it's like, are those words or is that my felt experience? And so I think every spiritualist will come to a place where it's not enough that they've learned the words. It's good to learn the words. Actually, you gotta, sometimes you need to get it right so that you can orient yourself in a way that you could feel it. I think most of the time it's like that. So I really like study, and I like philosophy and theology, but it's not it, it's not the end. Because then what? Your concepts and all these pretty concepts and words just become cudgels that you fight with other people with and argue over what's right and what's wrong, and you don't exactly have this right, but it's like, do we feel this stuff? God is immanent within everything. Like, do I feel that? And if I don't, I need to take that into my personal spiritual life. And so I like what you said. It's like that the two things are married, like the personal God and the concept are completely aligned. And the way I say that is like, I want to breathe my philosophy now. I don't just want to speak it, but it should be like my life breath. And if it's accurate, it will be, And so there's also like a challenging to put forth to crush the doubt that, like, if it's not true, let it go. Let me find out if it's true or not. And I think that's actually, this is a slightly different topic, but that's the fervor which brought, medieval Indic discourse so far, is that you had people that were actually willing to press the truth and press it to find it. They weren't afraid that it was like, oh, we've got to protect the truth. Why do you have to protect truth? Truth is wholly outside of and above and bigger than you and includes you. Why do you have to protect it? So the Bhagavatam starts with Satyam Param Dhimahi. Let us meditate on the truth. We don't need to be scared that somebody will snuff out the truth. So the recklessness of being able to find that. Yeah, that's what I see as underpinning Vedic discourse. So thank you for that. Okay, the question from Rasangi: we're programmed to love God. Can you say more about that? So I really like this because it's something that was very intuitive to me, and I think it's intuitive to a lot of people early on in spiritual life, that there's a like a God-shaped hole in your heart, that you're looking for God, and God's the only one that can fill that hole. And I would say that because of our position, because we are little parts of the whole, in technical terms, we are paramatmaika sheshatva. We are tiny little individual, indivisible, irreducible portions of transcendent reality. And many people have heard the analogy of the ocean and the drop of salt water. Constitutionally speaking, we are completely transcendent and constitutive of the same stuff that God is. But we are looking for the whole, because we are deficient in the sense that it's self-evident that we're not the whole, because there are other people around us who we are not, whose heads we cannot be in. That's a good way to say it. We have God's DNA. And so we're hopelessly looking for ourself, but deeper than ourself. We're looking for the whole that we're a part of. We're looking to belong. And that belonging is in love, ultimately. That belonging is in love. That's the ultimate goal for us. So we're programmed for that search. So coming at this from the other side, we're programmed for that search. It's self-evident because that's what we're doing. We're running around, like I was saying earlier, we're looking for someone to love, and we don't know who that is. The love isn't the question. Sometimes we wonder, after we've gone through enough someones and it hasn't worked out, we wonder if we should be loving at all. Jiva Goswami says that actually in the beginning. He says that people give up love because they can't find someone to love. Ultimately, they can't find God. And so they give up love also. But we're programmed to look for it. Nobody had to teach you. You didn't have to take, abstruse literary classes and understand the classics and Shakespeare and all of that. People fall in love. They just fall into it. And you don't have to be trained. And so it's that urge that I'm saying is we're programmed to love God. And you get to that by, the other stuff that we were talking about, that loving anyone else messes up somewhere down the line. Even if it's not so simple that it's just like love is lust and it's only self-gratification, which from this verse that Jiva Goswami shares, we can understand, no, there's priti, there's affection, there's love in this world. The problem is it's temporary. It's not lasting. And the people that we love we're loving them because we're not actually loving them. We're loving what they're identifying with and what we misidentify them as. And so they have to be taken away from us, and we have to be taken away from them. And that doesn't work for love. It makes many great love stories, which compel us to do the search more. That's another interesting thing. Why are we programmed? How can we see that we're programmed to love? Why do we like tragedy? Why do we empathize with deep tragedy in that search and the seeming never attaining that thing? That's a question. I don't have a straightforward answer for that, but it's an observation. You can see we're programmed to love and to love God just by observing our motivations, observing the motivations of those around you, how love has its effect, what it does in this world. So we're programmed to love God. That's the only place that we can rest, actually. That's where we are looking to rest. Everything else, because it's against the actual current of reality. Everything else is exhausting. Our egoic trying to be the center and to be the object of love for others and adoration, like it's exhausting because we're not big enough for that. We can't handle it, actually. We can't reciprocate well. There's one verse where Akrura, he's speaking about Krishna, and he says that there's no loss in him and there's no gain in him. He's always exactly the same. And this is really important for those who are aspiring for love and aspiring to love God, understanding in a deep way that he can give himself to someone and not lose any of himself. So he can then give himself to another one and not lose any of himself. Because again, you think about this from a psychological perspective, from a question of like, do I really want this? I need to feel very secure. This person is going to be able to reciprocate with me if I surrender to them. If I go through the process of taking Krishna as my sharana, as my shelter, is he going to be there for me? Is God going to be there for me? And the Shastra says that actually he can be there for everyone. That's why he's a worthy recipient of love, because he doesn't have a problem with, just like if you love your wife, you love your kid. They both need time. You have two kids. They both want your attention. You can't give your attention to both of them exactly the way that they want it. It creates dissatisfaction for both of them because you're a limited being. God's not a limited being. So we're programmed to love God because we're programmed to love someone who can love just us. So God is that transrational, paradoxical being who can love just everyone. And that's wild. It's completely wild. But that's what we need. And that's why he's a willing center for reality, or not a fitting center for reality, because he can love just everyone at the same time, harmoniously. And so it's then you just think, what the hell am I doing? Why am I not chasing after that? This is stupid. Whatever I'm doing is stupid. Why am I not chasing after that? And so that's the dawning of, okay, I've got a prayojana. Maybe love is a worthy prayojana. Maybe I should chase after this thing. But we got to remind ourselves, because it's easy to lose it.
I just have a quick example of what you're saying, Ujjwal, it's sometimes said the flame of a candle. You can light so many candles off of the same flame, and that flame is not reduced.
Mm.
It's not diminished, and it's not added to by
Yeah,
lighting more
that's
flames.
true. That's true. I think I remember that also in talking about Krishna and all of his avatars, that he's the avatari, so he's the first candle. And he's not reduced, and innumerable candles come out, and it's not, oh, that original one is really suffering because we lit so many candles, it's really dwindling. No, it's bright as ever, still just as bright. And that analogy applies here also. That's great.
Okay, we had a few people join in live, but I don't know if they were real people or not. They were robots. Yeah, sorry about that.
We live in 2024, and crazy things are going on.
Right, right. We have about 10 minutes to make an hour and a half. Bhakti Ras, you have something more? Please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you want to go this is a slightly different direction. But I'll ask it and see if you would like to address it. Is the topic of codependency, because a lot of what you are explaining about love and the fully giving of oneself and all that, I can see how some people would think that the words you're using also can be used to describe codependency. And in the codependent world, that is, the same words might be used. So how is what you're saying not codependency?
Well, I would say that codependency, and this is what's coming to me intuitively now, I would say that codependency is a result of what I was talking about earlier, where you just have your expectations unaligned. The modern world doesn't have any answer for codependency other than depending on oneself, so that you can be strong enough to not be dependent enough on another person. But that's when you're talking about multiple limited entities. We need dependency. So spiritual life starts with Sharanagati. It starts with utter dependency, and that's God. We go and we say, I am dependent on you. You are my Sharana. When I'm scared, I come to you. When I have a problem, I come to you. When something good happens, I thank you. Like, I recognize I have a what's the word I'm looking for? I have a dependent existence, basically. You are the fundament of my existence. When you put that on somebody else, that's ugly, because they're not that. And when we expect that, then we're frustrated and they're frustrated. And when we do it together, yeah, we all know, and it's just getting worse and worse in this world, especially because people have less relationships to spread all that pressure out on. So if you don't have God, and then you also don't have a family, and you're looking for one romantic partner who's going to fulfill everything for you, yeah, that's going to be a shit show. Pardon my French. That's going to be really not that great, and we all know that. But that's not an issue if you put the first thing first. Again, you water the root of the tree, everything else works out because now you have a context for it. We need to be dependent. It's just, where are we bringing that? And then we can know, oh, I don't have to expect this of these people. You know, I can have expectations, but healthy expectations. You know, I can have small love. You know, I can have properly contextualized love, you know, with these people. And that's, to the Western mind, that may seem like it's deflating. Like, oh, that means I don't actually love them, because we have this like funny addiction. I got this, you know, reading Jung and some of his followers and what they say about love and transference and these things. We have this funny addiction in the Western psyche. And by the Western psyche, I mean the psyche that's grown up in the last 2000 years, you know, in European countries and largely straddled the world. We have this funny addiction to like the rapturous love, which will settle for nothing less than what we now label as like codependence and all this. But what is it? Actually, it's a call to the depths of spirituality. And we just have to put it in the right place. Like, why are there so many addicts in this world? Because we're meant to be hopelessly and helplessly addicted to something. We're not meant to just be like static, neutral, like, yeah, I got it all figured out and life is nice and I feel good. We're meant to like be in it. You know, Krishna's in it. His people are in it, but there's harmony there. Nobody's getting hurt because all the energy can flow in the right way that it's supposed to flow. And it all flows back towards someone who can bear it all with utter grace. You know, Krishna's not sweating because too many people are loving him. He's becoming more of who he is and what he is because of all that love. And then that's all being distributed, and they're all becoming more of who they are and what they are. And that's the pulse of real life. That's what we're trying to enter into. Again, if we're approaching it from this like trying to make like a blueprint or an archetype and like talk about concepts about how that's happening, which I think is very useful, at least for my mind, for being compelled to think, oh yeah, that sounds nice. You know, because sometimes religion doesn't come off that way. Sometimes religion is just scary. And if you don't think enough about it, you just find yourself years and years in with a lot of commitment and fear that you'll be rejected if you have thoughts. And that's no way to form a prayojana. You know, that's just fear.
Really appreciate your response. Really beautiful. Thank you for that. I think that's quite helpful.
Great. Great.
Well, you certainly stirred up a lot of thoughts for me. I'm sure we could extend this longer. I don't know what your time is. I mean, if we have a few more minutes, or if we could call it here.
I've got about 5 more minutes if you've got something pressing, and then yeah, I think that would work.
I had a few thoughts. The one was about the finitude of romantic relationships in this world. And you know, in describing, I'm happy you did come to use that word, that you know these relationships are finite, and it made me think like how to find infinity, how to find eternality in this world. And that led me back to this understanding of love as a feeling, and that within the feeling there can be the glimpse of eternity within a moment of absorption in love, or maybe practically any feeling. Really, you might have such anger that gives you a glimpse of like an eternal hell, you know. But in this case, we'll talk about the opposite, you know, a loving paradise, that even though this world is finite, it's suggestive of something eternal, and that the love as a feeling, within the feeling of love, we're pointed towards, you know, what doesn't end, I guess.
Yeah, and I think again, because you're bringing up it in a romantic context, I think, and you know, this is something that one has to explore. I believe now that there's a reason why the modern psyche is so wholly compelled towards that. So if you think about what romantic love does to people, romantic love makes people give everything else up and throw off everything and give up their careers and get in ways that end up really awful, actually. Give up like one relationship to be in another relationship, give up their, like I said, careers to bankrupt themselves. It really actually, in a completely counterproductive way, draws full self-surrender out of people to the worship, if you will, of that experience. And to me, and to some other people that have noted this, that I've read it from, this isn't my realization, this is just something that I agree with now. That speaks towards the spiritual quest. The reason that's there to me is because largely most, like, modern man is divorced from any real outlet for spiritual connection. And because that is an integral part of him, that it's not his choice or her choice or their choice to just decide whether they want that connection or not. It is something so integral that it must burst out somewhere. That what we see in the past, if you look at the way the literature has developed and the myths have developed, what we see in the last 1500 years is the burgeoning forth of spiritual desires in a completely unhealthy context. But what is it indicative of? It is indicative of exactly what it is: the desire to fully give oneself to a rapturous relationship with God. Again, it's not conscious. The problem with anything in this world is whether it's conscious or not. So if something is done unconsciously, it's always going to be destructive, because then you're basically just at the whim of the thing that you're not paying attention to. But every person who's ever been in love, if they have the right context, in romantic love specifically, if they have the right context to view that experience and look back at it, see what happened there, what that was like, there's an inestimable wealth of knowledge and growth that one can have, and one can take forward, and one can say, like, why didn't that work out? Why did such a good thing, such a powerful, positive thing, not work out? Why do I want to do that again if it was so bad? Like, if it ended so badly, why am I willing to do that again? What is it about that thing that is so compelling? And that's a track right towards God, if we're talking about it in the context of this. And that's the modern world, that's what we're dealing with. So, yeah, I think these things point towards transcendence, as you said.
Thank you, Prabhu. Or is there any last word you would like to give us in conclusion before letting us go?
I'd just like to share my appreciation. Bhakti Rasa, thank you very much for inviting me here. I have not given a presentation in a very long time, and that shows a lot in the first 45 minutes of this presentation. If nobody else sees that, then I'm lucky because I could feel that. But I'm really happy with the dialogue at the end. And, thank you both for kind of stewarding it in that direction. And at the end of the day, these are really, really wonderful things to talk about. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about the goal of our lives, what we're aiming towards. So may we all aim a little deeper. And thank you guys for doing good work.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.